Good evening. Welcome to the Laughing Monkey Music Show. Today on Steve Gorman. How are you?
I'm all right, my man. How about you?
I'm doing good. Steve is doing radio and he has another band going on, most famously known for the Black Crows. But I thought we'd touch base today and talk about what's going on now. Introduce people that don't know. He's got a show is syndicated, and I'll have the links to his website. You can find all the affiliates and everything and check out the show. And we can talk about what's going on with his other band right now to start the show off. Let's actually talk about radio, though, for you. Going from being on one side, be a musician and performing all the
Yeah.
time, and then went right to radio. Transition, what was that?
It was pretty unorthodox because I started in sports talk radio specifically. For a decade. I was a broadcasting major in the mid 80s at Western Kentucky University. My
Oh,
my
okay.
thoughts then were that I would be a sportscaster. At around 19, it dawned on me I wouldn't make the NBA. It's like slowly but surely I realized, oh wait, I'm nowhere near good enough to even play college basketball. Okay, fair enough. But a huge sports fan, and I was at a school, as it turned out, with a good broadcasting department, and I had a good voice, and I just thought, well, I love sports and I can talk, so let's do this. So, I mean, without a whole lot of thought, that's what I was thinking would happen. Obviously, I decided to drop out and buy a drum kit and pursue that first. That went well. It took
Yeah.
me off on a whole nother trajectory for a long time. When sports talk radio started blowing up in the late 90s, like the first time I ever heard the Jim Rome show, the first
Yeah.
time I ever heard him, he was talking about the Replacements of all bands. And then people called in from all across the country to talk about the Replacements on a sports talk show. And I was literally doing landscaping in my front yard. I'm like planting things and digging holes and listening to the radio. And I thought, oh my God, what a cool thing. Like sport, because everybody I know loves sports and music.
Yeah.
Like
It
my
makes
whole life
sense.
was all my friends. Who's your favorite band? What are your favorite teams? That's it. That's like the start of every bar room conversation.
Yeah.
And so that idea was planted long time ago in my head that, man, I could do that. That's something there for me. But the Black Crows at that time were 100% of my time. It wasn't anything I thought about doing. I just thought I could do it one day, whatever. Very disparate thoughts and feelings about it. A few years later, 2004, I moved to Nashville. My family, we moved here. A few years after that, in pickup line at preschool, as where all the great connections in life occur. Once your kids start school, you start meeting all this new group of people.
It is weird,
Another
isn't it?
dad in line. Yeah. My daughter's dear friend. They had just met and they were best friends. They're 4 years old
Which
or
means you're best
5 years
friends
old at
now
this time.
with their parents.
Yeah, they're still good buddies. The other dad was a local sports talk guy, on the local station here in Nashville. And we're shooting the shit in pickup line one day. And he goes, oh, you should come in and sit on the show sometime. I said, sure. And I started doing that. And I used to do radio hits for the Black Crows all the time. I'd go to the rock station and
Yeah.
do stuff. I'd been on the mic a bunch. I started sitting in on a local sports talk show every now and again. I'd go in for an hour. And it was just always fun. And I'm good in those settings. I'm confident I could kind of hold court, and I knew that it was like here's this rock guy talking sports. And so I would just come in and just take over because I don't do normal sports thoughts or talk. After I'd been on the show a few times, the PD said, man, you want to do a weekly segment? I'll get you a sponsor. We could make this happen. And I said, actually, I'd rather have my own show, which is a hilarious thing to say. That's why I said it. I was being funny. And his response was, really? What is it? And I said, well, how about musicians talking sports? And this is Nashville, and he literally went, yeah, what about Sunday nights? I mean, it was like that. And he goes, let's get lunch
Wow.
tomorrow and talk about it. And like 10 days later, I was on the air. It was called Steve Gorman Sports. And I was just nowhere in the right. I was so underprepared. And, it's one thing to sit in on another show, but
Right.
I went in on a Sunday night. It's like 8 p.m. on a Sunday. It's the summer. No one's listening. But that red light went on. And I had to say, this is Steve Gorman Sports. And I literally was like, oh my God, I've made a huge mistake. And then by the end of that 1 hour, I was actually having fun. And it just started there. Long story short, I did it off and on for a few years here in Nashville. I'd go on tour and then I'd come back and he'd give me some Sunday nights. I immediately started seeing it as a down the road someday this might be something I could really do. For a while I didn't do radio. I did a podcast for a couple of years that did really well. I mean, this is in 9 and 10 before
Yeah.
podcasts were, and I remember then thinking, oh, I think I missed the boat on these, because then in 11 I went back to radio when I was home, and so I was doing local sports talk radio on 5 days a week for 2 years, and then Fox Sports Radio gave me a show nationwide. I mean, the whole thing was very much coming in through the side door.
It's amazing.
But that's a really long-winded way of saying, in a weird way, it was always kind of in the back of my mind, and then it just started. One thing led to another, and I did sports for a long time. It really got old. It got kind of burnt. Our sports show on Fox Sports Radio was very different, very unique. My cousin was my co-host, and we just have an entire language and shtick of our own, and we wanted that show to sound like nothing else on the network, and we accomplished that for sure. After a few years and the new people running the network, they were very cool to us because they said directly, we don't get it. Like, the guy that hired us left, and then all of a sudden we were like, the new guys were like, you guys should talk more about sports. This is called Fox Sports Radio. And we were like, yeah, we'll try, but but it also just it ran its course. You can tell when something feels. If I learned one thing from being in a band that all those years, I learned to trust when something no longer feels like it used to. And then I tried to look ahead and say, well, is it fixable? And if so, do I even want to fix it? Maybe it's time to do something else. And that's ultimately what happened with Steve Gorman Sports. For a variety of reasons, it was just a matter of, okay, it's not how long are we going to be on the air? It's how long are we going to stay? And let's get out of here. And we had a great run, and it was we had a really great last show. Like, they let us know way ahead of time, hey, here's an end date. It was all totally cool. So I really loved it, and I don't miss it at all. I don't miss preparing a sports show every day. It's actually a lot goes into it, and it was kind of, after a while I just got drained with it wasn't an argumentative show. It was trying to be an antidote to angry guys yelling about sports, because and after a while I couldn't help myself. You just find yourself creating arguments for content, and that wasn't our thing at all. We were not going to fit into a square hole, or whatever that analogy is. Anyway, I got off the air in the fall of 18, and right away I got a call, hey, are you interested in doing classic rock, from another network and a guy I'd worked with before. And I said, yeah, but I want some time off. And as it turned out, it was exactly 1 year. Like, Steve Gorman Sports went off the air, I think, September 7th of 18, and then Steve Gorman Rocks hit September 9th of 2019. It was I took a year away, finished the book, edited it, got it released, did all that in that time. And then started the Classic Rock Show, which is an entirely different skill, same muscles, different game, like much shorter segments for me, but it's a bunch of music, and, it's a standard classic rock show that's on 5 nights a week now, nationwide. We put the log together, and it's not, I don't have to Google who was the starting point guard in 1969, for a band.
Right.
I know a lot of that stuff already. And I do look up stories for certain things at times, but a lot of this show it's just me chiming in on an opinion or a story about my life related to the song we're listening to. It's a whole different ball game than doing sports talk.
I can hear that. That's how I am with this podcast. I know you, I know your stuff, but every now and then I get a guest on I don't know a lot about, and it's like a lot of work as opposed to just having a
Yeah.
conversation. It's like two different
Yeah.
worlds. I went to school in Atlanta for a recording at the Art Institute. Same time the first album, the Crows album, broke. So,
Okay.
so at that time, but one of the things we learned about was like radio and recording everything. But radio, some people don't realize, can be one of the scariest things, because just you, and there's no feedback, or there's no audience. It's just crickets.
Yeah.
It's when I want to think, I'll give you props, because doing that is hard, and you're used to having an
Yeah.
audience clapping for you, and it's just you alone, the mic.
Well, the good thing, I tell you what, that's one thing that Twitter saved us on Steve Gorman Sports. Once Twitter took off for sports radio, we got feedback through the show every day, constantly. And we really embraced that. Like, our sensibility, the producer of that show, my buddy Brandon Ganetz, and I, we put the show together locally. And then when it went nationwide, he didn't want to be on the mic, so he became the producer, and I brought my cousin in. Brandon and I, the way when social media was first, 10 years ago, everybody's looking at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We were just Twitter people. It's just that simple. Like, it's faster, it's quicker. You get more for wit than insight. You know, it's funny.
Mm.
It's just, Twitter was hilarious 10 years
It,
ago.
it was. It
I
was
know
great.
people might find that hard to believe, but it was a really fun place to spend an hour. It was great. And it worked great for the show because we encouraged people constantly to hit us up on Twitter, and they did, and we got feedback. And then, because taking phone calls is awful, callers are terrible for radio. They all the ums and hemming and hawing, and then they try too hard to be funny, and they don't. You learn really quickly to just go, 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 go. It's forward momentum. You got to keep people's interest, and you want it to feel more like an actual conversation as opposed to a stilted one where you're waiting for some guy who's been waiting 9 minutes on hold, and then suddenly he doesn't remember what he wanted to say. So we got rid of phone calls almost immediately and just responded to tweets. So that was all great. That feedback was helpful. When I first started doing local sports talk, yeah, that wasn't happening, and it's weird because then you are looking
Yeah.
at the phone and going, please, please, someone call. And then when they
Engage.
do call, they call to say, what do you think you're doing? Your show sucks. And then you're like, oh no, it's pretty
It's
funny.
the radio was hard. I did radio for a while when I was younger too. That's why I wanted
Yeah,
to do
I
props
think
in
I
that
think
one.
I'll tell you one other thing that helped is being the drummer. I didn't work the crowds. I wasn't someone who was actually focused on audience reaction. Generally speaking, as a performer, if a singer or a guitarist went into the radio studio, they would probably feel that lack of feedback a lot more harshly than I did.
Right.
Now that I'm thinking about it, I never concerned myself with trying to perform for the audience. That was everyone else's job. I was just trying to keep the thing where it needed to be.
Which is what you're
I'm
doing
playing.
now, though, right? Think
Yeah.
about it.
Was
As
that?
a, you were the engine of the band,
Yeah.
and what do you do when you're doing radio? You're the engine of the show. So
Right.
you're still kind of.
Yeah.
It's not about your ego. It's about the show. Just like
No,
drumming.
backseat driver for sure. And I've often attributed that to the fact that I played sweeper in soccer my whole life too. It's like, I'm running the field, but no one knows it but me. It's always been my sort of mindset when I'm doing stuff.
You're like the backdoor ninja attitude. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah,
So we're doing a little bit backwards here. So after the Crows, though, and actually during the Crows, you started Trigger Hippie, right? It was like towards
yeah,
the
yeah,
what?
yeah. Trigger Hippie.
So
The
it's a
first
great
time we
band.
played,
So
we
please, I'm
we
sorry.
played a show as Trigger Hippie in 2009. First time I used the words Trigger Hippie, but that really wasn't anything that the band became. But Nick, the bassist, Nick Goverick, and I were the mainstays and the founders and the constants of Trigger Hippie. Uh, and so yeah, back in 2009, we did a one-off gig in Macon, Georgia, and used that name with Audley Freed and Jimmy Herring, and it was just a night of covers as a fundraiser, and it was a blast. When we decided to, hey, let's actually get some original music going and let's find some people to be in a band, we thought, well, that was actually a cool name. Let's just keep that name Trigger Hippie, even though it's different people, because it was a one-off gig, it didn't matter. The band sort of by design was, initially it was the rhythm sections here and let's see who else shows up, basically. And it's hard to build a band in that, it's much easier for a singer to go find a rhythm section than for a rhythm section to find a singer,
Right.
for a lot of reasons that I think are probably pretty obvious. But that's how we've always done it. And the first lineup that was like an official lineup, we put a record out in 2014 and toured and did very well, but it was not built to last for a variety of perfectly sensible reasons. That lineup was just not going to stay around very long. Everybody was very busy. Nick and I wanted to continue, and so we did. We went away for a couple of years, and then by 2016, we're like, hey, we got all these songs, man. Let's do something. Let's find some people that want to kind of stick around. And so, we put another record out in 2019, and for the Trigger Hippie 2.0, it was a whole different mindset. It really was like, okay, this is going to be the band. Like, this lineup is it. And if someone can't make a gig, we're not going to fly in a buddy to fill in for them. Like, this is the lineup. And
Wow.
and then, shortly after the record came out, of course, there was this pandemic, you may remember.
Yeah, I heard about that.
That sidelined us immediately and damn near permanently, because it's really hard to put the pieces back together when you aren't a totally established touring act. We were rebuilding relationships with promoters, and then it went away again. And right now, the last thing a promoter wants to hear is, hey, I don't know if we'll sell any tickets, but do you want to play a gig? We have gigs and we're booking stuff for next year, but the idea of it being like a full-time band that's not even, we're not even thinking about it in those terms.
It could be because
Which is,
when people.
and trust me, that I was going to say, which is fine, because at 57, I'm not interested in doing 150 gigs next year in
No,
any
but
capacity.
you're a seasoned. It's a good band though. They're all seasoned musicians though, so it's not like people are
Oh yeah,
walking into some weird ad hoc jam session trying to be something. You guys are a good
yeah,
band. So even if they didn't know you and they walked into a show or a performance or a festival, people are gonna start dancing, going, "I like this." You know, that's the
yeah.
kind of
I
vibe you
I think
guys
it's a
do.
great band. I No, I really do. I think we're fantastic, and there's a part of me that makes it okay. That's really the point. I mean, I don't have to, like, again, I feel like if we were struggling to figure out who we were, I might be more inclined to try to play more show. Like, I would feel like we got to do something, and I don't feel that at all. Like, when we get together and play, it's badass, and we have a great time, and it truly is. Like, we're still playing most of the shows we play. There's a lot of people who haven't seen us before, and it always goes over well, and people dig it, and that's all I'm looking for at this point. I get every itch I need musically, that band scratches. So as far as it is right now, it's all good with me.
That's awesome. Well, and then so during the pandemic,
And
actually
and and
between
that's not to say, not hey, sorry.
no,
I was going to say, that's not to say I wouldn't love to see something. If more opportunities came up, of course, if someone opens a door, we'll go through it. But the idea of just grinding, trying to make something happen, I don't even know what that something would be. So it's where it sits right now is perfectly cool with me.
I don't think anybody knows how that grind works anymore after this. I think it really changed the world
Yeah.
and clubs and touring, and it's like people can't even get buses and vinyls out and
Hmm.
merchandise. Everything's out the window right now. It's literally just a grab for what a band can put
Yeah.
together, especially on the mid, on the second to third tiers. I mean, if you're going to be a Beyonce or Billie Eilish or something, you got your thing going on. But below that, it's a hard run right now for anybody. So I think everyone's trying to figure out the new model. You know.
Yeah. I have two nephews who are both full-time musicians. They're brothers. One is the singer and guitarist, and what? No, they're not in
You're
the
like,
same band.
no, come on. It's kind of funny when you say that.
Oh, well, I've got like 18 nephews. I'm from a huge family. I was
I
just
know, but
stressing that it's not two
right.
different brothers of mine's kids. My brother Jim, two of his three sons are both musicians. That's the easiest way to say what I was trying to say. Um, Jeff is in a band called Illiterate Light, and they put a record out in 19. They have another one coming out in January, and they're from Harrisonburg, Virginia. Fantastic band, and they're a fully functioning. They've got everything. They were on Atlantic Records. They've got management agent. They're full on operation, and they're tremendous. And they were just going when the pandemic hit. I mean, it was all right there. So they had a really rough time. At 30 years old, right when all the pieces, the dominoes are all falling, and then for them to get the plug pulled was
Oh,
really tough. And they got through it, and they're back out now operating full time, and they're going to be great because they're a band that again, anybody that ever sees them goes, holy shit, this is real. And then my other nephew, his brother Eggy's a drummer in a band from Denver called the Kind Hearted Strangers, and they're just kicking. They're out playing a lot of shows, but those guys are, that's guys who are in it for real, like full time, and it is at this point in time, it is so much tougher than it's ever been, and they're figuring it out. They're bright guys, and they have good people they're playing with, and that's all. They'll find their way, whatever that way's supposed to be. But I cannot imagine being in my 20s in the year 2022 and thinking, okay, let's go hit the road and find an audience. It just sounds impossible to me.
well, it's not just being a band. You're being your own manager. You're being everything. A lot of the labels are looking for turnkey when they can kind of come in and just kind of have it all done for them already now. And at that point, the bands are like,
100%.
why do I need this? I just need a distributor, and that's it. I mean, at this point. So I think a little more business sense
It's
for the artists.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, like you said, it's so different. They're looking for, in the old days, A&R guys, they didn't want a band that was great. They wanted a band that was good, that they could put the finishing touches on. I mean, it makes
Right.
sense. You want to mold,
Right.
you know, everybody that ever made it, per se. Every musician that's gotten a deal and toured and had success knows another musician or another band from their hometown that's awesome that never went anywhere. And my theory has always been, if you're too good, then the A&R guy's bored. He's like, well, what am I going to do for you? You already have it figured out. I mean,
Right.
there's just a lot of really good artists. I mean, the magic of the timing of my band, Mr. Crow's Garden, back then, meeting George Drakoulias, was we had a lot of potential and talent, but we hadn't figured out what to do with it yet. And he saw exactly what our strengths were. And he saw a band that he was like, oh, I know exactly what to do with these guys if they're interested in working with me. And that worked out really, really well. And like I said, there were other bands that I'd go see and go, man, they blow us away. And nobody was interested because
What did you guys
it
sound like?
just seems like there wasn't enough to. We
For
were
now.
in 1988 when we met George. We still had a little bit of a jangle, REM influenced Southern indie, not alternative, but like literal, back then independent was a real word. Indie music, we loved, we did Birds covers and, more, not country like country now, but country rock. Graham Parsons was a big influence. The
All right.
Birds, Green on Red was one of Chris's favorite bands, Paisley Underground stuff. And then, of course, REM was just this umbrella over the entire indie scene in the Southeast in the 80s. And we were figuring the Long Riders was another band we really took a lot of cues from. So there was that going on. We were in the process of, but we were starting to learn covers we started doing like Aerosmith covers, and we were trying to really stretch ourselves. And what if a song had more than 4 chords? Let's see what might happen. When George met us, we did an Aerosmith cover and we did a Stooges cover, and then we did like 8 originals. And the first thing he said was, well, your songs are no good and you guys aren't very good, but those covers were kind of cool, basically. And he saw something in us. There was a kindred spirit. And he just thought anybody in 1988 that's playing Iggy Pop and Steven Tyler in the same set, there's something going on with those guys. And right after we met George, he like I said, he saw right away in my playing and in Rich's playing what we were good at, what we were naturally inclined to do. There's a groove there, there's a vibe there that we weren't taking advantage of. And then, of course, Chris just had an amazing stage presence. It wasn't in your face. He was still pretty inward on stage. He had a lot more, look at me, don't look at me, young guy trying to figure out his stage persona.
Right.
But there was you couldn't take your eyes off of him. He had a real intensity, and it was not manufactured on any level. It was real. I mean, George saw the band a year after I first saw Mr. Crow's Garden. And the first time I saw Mr. Crow's Garden, I was like, holy shit, look at that guy. There's something going on there. And George had the same reaction. So he saw right away there was something there. We didn't know what we were doing with it, but he could see that there was something there worth, working with and trying to pursue.
I it's interesting because when I was in college, and I got the tape when it came out. It was like right when it came out, and I was in Atlanta. So obviously you guys are from Atlanta, and some guy in the studio I was working with goes, "Oh yeah, you like Black Crowes?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I had their demo tape, Mr. Crow's Guard. It was like some punk crap. I didn't like it." I'm like, "Punk?"
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, because you didn't have the internet, you didn't have anything, I just knew of that. I'm like, "How did they go from punk to this?" Like, so it kind of plays
It
into an
wasn't punk.
Iggy.
It was just
Well, people have different
well, it
opinions
wasn't
of
punk.
things.
It was fast.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody liked punk rock. I mean, but it was just fast, jangly music. The demos they recorded before I was playing with them, it was very, very REM's the obvious touch point, so I'll keep saying that. But it was like early REM. The songs are at a way faster beats per minute than you realize until you try to play them.
yeah.
It's just go, 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 go. So there was that going on, and it was just volume in place of ability, in that regard. It's kind of like punk, I guess. But the thing about Mr. Lose sight of this, but you know, everybody eventually the growth curve of a real band, it's really steep and really fast. Once you figure something out, you apply it, and your whole band we sounded like a different band every 3 months, because we were learning how to play individually and collectively. We were all learning. So, and every time we wrote a new song, we added it to the set and dropped an old one. I mean, if you saw Mr. Crow's Garden for once a quarter in 1988, you had it by the band was so different from the beginning of that year to the end. You wouldn't have played. If you saw us every 3 months, you would have heard a few of the same songs. If you saw us in January and saw us again in November, not one of the songs would have been the same. And we had added a guitarist, and we were We were learning different, more interesting covers. Like it was 1988 was the year when we just went from, this could be kind of cool to this is actually getting cool.
The arc in
And
that
that's
time period is great.
what any band does. That's what you're supposed to do, So locally, people are like, what are they doing? They don't even know who they are. And it's like, no, we were just finding ourselves. It's not, and trust me, it's not pretty in real time. Because for every great song, for every cool song you write two that kind of suck, but you don't know the difference back then. You're just figuring it out. The one thing we had was a sense of alacrity. Like we never wanted for ambition. So, that's a big part of it.
Now you said before you were actually still working when the album came out at a record store.
Yeah, the day Shake Your Moneymaker came out, I was putting it in the bins at Wax and Facts and Little Five Points.
Oh, I was gonna ask where you were at. Okay,
Yeah.
where you working? A little fun area.
Yeah, no, trust me, it was not how I imagined my first album coming out. I thought there would be some champagne involved and possibly a room full of adoring fans, and instead I was just sitting there like, well, guess I'm gonna just work today at the record store and see what happens.
Well, luckily it worked out well for you guys. But like I said, with the sound, you guys changed so much, and it's people. I want people to check out this book. It's great. There's a lot of stories. I don't want to give away too much, but I want to just touch on a few things, if you don't mind, with the growth and some of the changes. From Shake Your Moneymaker, obviously you guys took some time and really grew. But then the Southern Harmony Musical Companion, once again, was a leap year. It was another sound that
Sure.
was it's like almost like light. I mean, you can see the progression, but it was still almost another. It felt like it was another group again. Like the
Well, it was a
talent, the
different
songs.
band. I mean, it was the band. Two things, real to put it simply. Shake Your Moneymaker was a band who were pretending to be a band. Looking back, now we were a real band, but we'd
Right,
never made a record before. We'd never
right.
been in the studio really before, and it was paint by numbers. A producer leading us by our, here taking the ring in our nose and pulling us to where he needed us to go. Well, we went out and toured for 20 months, and we took the gigs very seriously. We really wanted to be a great band. We listened to a lot of Little Feat and Led Zeppelin bootlegs, just as an example. Like we weren't listening to them and going, "Hey, that rocks." We're like, "Listen to that. Where are these connection points? What do they do?" Two things were going on there. Like I said, the band that made Shake Your Moneymaker toured for 20 months and played, over 300 shows, and so we became a very formidable rock and roll band. Like the band that we sounded like on Shake Your Moneymaker, we became that actual band. Like we were a world-class rock and roll band. And then along the way, we added Ed Harsh, who was a phenomenal musician, and he was a big
Yeah,
part of that growth. He was a music teacher for all of us, and not in a specific by design way. Just when you add someone that great to the mix, everyone's going to raise their game. And we did it without thinking. It wasn't effortless, but it was mindless. It was just completely like, we got to keep up with that guy. So he was a humongous influence on the band throughout the calendar year 1991. He started with us in January. The tour ended in October. And again, like I said before, if you saw us in January 91 and saw us in October 91, you would have been like, man, that's a whole different band.
right.
And then on top of that, we also, for the second record, added Mark Ford. And I think that's the thing a lot of people first recognized was there's this very unique otherworldly lead guitarist in the band now. And he and Rich connected musically in a way that was spectacular and unique and really amazing. And I've said this a lot, and it's not on any way to take away any of Mark's importance, but the band was also he joined a very different band than had made Shake Your Moneymaker. All of which to say, it's just the perfect recipe. All the ingredients were just exactly perfect at that moment. And if you changed one thing out, it's a whole different situation. So the four guys that were there originally, the guy we added, and then the other guy we added, we couldn't have done that if we had planned it. It just had to happen. It fell in the way it fell in. And that there's real magic in music. Chemistry is such an important factor, and that's the one thing you cannot manufacture and fake. And we had it like crazy for a few years there. And
Yeah,
that
and well then, They led to Amorca too. It was again, it just keeps playing
Yeah.
into the buildup of that album. Sounded like nothing. That was, you know, even though I'm surprised it didn't sell as big as I thought it did. Actually, when I looked up the numbers, I thought it was a lot bigger than it was because it's everyone listens to that album. I know, it's
Yeah,
one
no,
of the best.
it's well, Southern Harmony, I think internationally was bigger than Shake Your Moneymaker. In the States, Shake Your Moneymaker is the king. I mean,
Right.
it's sold at least three times as much as any other record.
Right.
In Europe and Australia and Japan, Southern Harmony was bigger, for whatever that's worth. So that made out there, but Amorica didn't do anything in real time anywhere. Um, it took a long time to just even go gold, I'm fairly confident it's never been gone platinum. It's never sold a million copies, but it's a record that's very well known for sure. And part of that is, you can look back and recognize, oh, well, what were we thinking? I mean, at the time, it was a big problem with the album cover. But there were two problems. The internal problem was no one liked it except Chris. And then the external problem was nobody,
Right. They liked it, but Chris.
record stores were cool, but other places, the box stores, you still saw more records at Walmart than people want to
Yeah.
admit, at least in the 90s, and
Yeah.
Kmart and Target and all that. And they wouldn't stock it. So I mean, right away we just shot ourselves in the foot. The music landscape had changed, which it always does. But again, looking back, that record came out the same day as Nirvana Unplugged and Tom Petty's Wildflowers. Like, we might have thought about putting that off to the first quarter of 95. Like, that thing coming out at the end of January, we would have had a better chance to make a splash, but we weren't thinking that way at the time. And we'd already recorded and then scrapped a whole album called Tall. And so, we didn't want to be on we wanted a record out every 2 years, and we were at 2.5. And it was like, no, get this damn thing out.
Well, I don't know. I think it was a great album. It's one of my favorites by you guys, actually. I have to say. Um, and I think that as
Yeah,
far as the
it's a
landscape
great,
goes,
sorry, it's a great band. I mean, there's just no getting around it,
no, it's like
and if people want to nitpick about songs, that's fine. I mean, taste is everyone's right. Whatever you think is right, but there's no denying that band was pretty special right then.
no, I think that was a band. It was the benchmark for you guys, and it wasn't about commercial sounds. You guys were just on firing on all cylinders and just writing the best songs as a band. That's what I feel like. There was no design, no
Yeah.
worrying about
Mhm.
anything. Obviously, yes, Chris with
Yep.
the cover, but at that point, Chris was also fighting, on a stage, Miller and endorsements, anything he could to fight the establishment, on
Yeah.
looking into the future now where he's a different guy. Um, but to that point though, with the Morca though, you guys did Three Snakes. It was a carryover, but I felt like the songs were a little bit different. Almost like it was a little bit more not commercial, but it was a little bit more rock radio friendly in the structure of the
There
songs.
was a
Was that
few. I mean,
on
Good Friday.
purpose?
Well, yeah, not no. I mean, not really. There was definitely, because there's some songs, Bring On, and How Much for Your Wings. You could call those weird songs if you wanted to, as far as in terms of radio. But then we had Good Friday. That's just a classic right down the middle fastball kind of
Yep.
song, but it wasn't written to be that. It was the song that was written. There was another song at that time called Just Say You're Sorry that was a B-side. Yeah,
The
we
B
weren't
side.
doing that on we weren't trying to write those kind of songs, but we had, like, Just Say You're Sorry was a song that I always thought, like, that's a total radio song. We just never got the take that we felt was perfect to put it on the record. Like, we weren't, you know, we would record it and they'd listen and we were like, oh man, everyone's going to love that song, but it just never fit in with the rest of the record. And we were definitely not thinking, but we should still do it because everyone will love it. We were still putting songs together the way we thought they made sense.
Right.
I mean, and we had songs that, a song like Blackberry is very catchy. It's,
Yeah.
I think lyrically, somebody, Desmond Child could have come in and written a set of lyrics that made it a giant hit. Like, oh, that's a fun song. We just didn't think that way. Chris heard it the way he heard it, and we were cool with it. And it's like, it's a funny tongue-in-cheek song from a Black Crowes perspective. It's not a tongue-in-cheek song the way a hitmaker would write, you
Right.
know?
But it was good. And Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, I thought it was a really good album. To me, all the
Yeah.
albums are changing, and I love an artist in a band that changes. I'd rather have an artist change do an album I don't like because they're doing something different than get the same album over and over again.
I
So
think we went 5 for 5. The fifth album being Banned, which was not released.
yeah,
I think I don't kick, like Shake Your Moneymaker was what it is. It's your first record,
right.
producer driven, thank God. Great debut album. There's no getting around it. And then the next three records were a band exploring and reaching their full maturity and getting the most out of it. And then we recorded a record called Band that was just fantastic, that for a lot of reasons was never released. And that was to me, that was the cherry on top. That was everything led to this record called Band that just didn't see the light of day. And shit happens. But we definitely, with that lineup, with Mark on board and Eddie and Johnny, from 91, the end of 91 to the summer of 97, that was just a great band. Getting in our own way occasionally, but for the most part riding above that and doing some really great work.
Do you think that album will ever come out officially, not just the bootleg? You know?
Well, there was a version of it in like 2006 called The Lost Crows. There's two
Yeah, I got
records.
that.
There's
Yeah,
Tall, the record we scrapped before Marca, and Band. Paul Stacey mixed those, but he didn't record them back in the day. It's just and Band was all done live. There's very few overdubs, and there's a lot of bleeding, so you can only do so much with the mixes. Doesn't sound all that great, but it could have. It's a woulda, coulda, shoulda. Could have
right.
really been something special.
And then you guys did By Your Side and Lions. Those were, big gap. I mean, you had a lot of breaks in between. They were solid albums. But during that time, actually, By Your Side and Lions, you guys got with Jimmy Page, which was great for you guys.
Yeah.
And me being a Zeppelin fan and a Black Crowes fan, I was
Yep.
pretty besides myself. I get the two great
Yeah.
things together. It was great. Um, and I think the two stories that stuck out probably you hear the most is the one when you can nap anywhere. That is, and Jimmy Page came in
Sure.
and tell you he's napping. And for
Yeah.
people that don't know, could you touch on that just briefly? You probably say it better than I do. I don't want to ruin it. That
Oh, it's just that simple. I learned early on in life as the youngest kid in a family, if it helps to just be able to sleep anywhere. I mean, there's family photos of me like literally honest laying on stairs, sound asleep. Like it's just always a thing. Like my brain just gets over exerted and it just shuts down. I got a power nap thing. I mean, I was doing that I've always done that. And so when I got on the road touring, it's like, man, give me a chair and a dressing room in 10 minutes and I'll be all good to go. It just became a part of, it's nothing I thought about consciously. I mean, other people always talked about it, but to me, it was just like, that's just me. It comes in handy on flights. It's a good skill to have, to just be able, my son can't do it. My daughter's great. She can just shut her eyes and go out for 20 minutes whenever she needs. It's an important skill set.
that's like a superpower. Well, yeah. Well, you talk about Jimmy Page come in and saw you out and thought you were you're nodding out from
Yeah,
drug
he was
use.
laughing. He was like, "Oh my God!" I like, he said something to the effect of, "I didn't think Steve was into drugs," and everybody laughed. Like, no, that's just him, because he couldn't believe Jimmy is. Well, I mean, it's just 20 years ago. He was still so amped before every show. He was
Right.
like, every gig was like his first gig. It was incredibly inspiring to be around, actually. So the idea of someone an hour before showtime just knocking off, he couldn't imagine it. He was blown away by that.
And well, then the idea of you actually getting this nap time thing going with him trying to lay down too and get a little
Oh
pre.
yeah, right. Yeah, that was late. Yeah, that's just one of those funny happenstances. We were in LA at the Greek Theater, and his dressing room had two big couches in it, and I just went in there and poked my head in. We're shooting the shit, and he looked at me and he goes, "I was thinking about trying to take a nap today." And I said, "Man, knock it out." And I said, "With this couch," and one thing led to another, and suddenly he's on one couch, I'm on the other, and we're both laying there talking, and then we both just fell asleep. And I woke up and he was still asleep, and I was like, "All right, yeah,
See, that's great. It's a great.
yes,
It's a good.
yeah."
What? You do this.
Like I said, I mean, if nothing else, I learned a lot from him, and hope maybe if he learned anything from me, it was that there's nothing wrong with a good power nap.
Yeah, it was a good story. It's a really funny story too to hear that. It's like to visualize it really humanizes the situation.
Yeah,
But then actually, and then the other thing was the whole thing about Jimmy leaving the tour and whether he was, because of he asked if he wanted to co-write and work with the band a little bit, and how he maybe took it because the guys said they didn't say it. You heard that he did say they
Yeah,
do it.
that's yeah, and it's all in my book, the
Right,
long
right. We don't need to go
story.
over it. I was surprised though. Either way, though, that Jimmy kind of just left the tour though that quickly. Being a professional musician.
Well, that's not the reason he left the tour. It's one of the reasons. He was a mess. His back was totally screwed up. I mean, and I say that very clearly. He was in a lot of pain, and he was
Right,
working. He was playing shows. He was having fun and really enjoying it, and which is but he had to be, because he was literally in pain on stage every night. It was not an easy thing for him to do, and so if there's one straw that broke the camel's back, I think it's that conversation he had with Rich. But it's not to say the back was. Who knows how long it would have lasted
no, no,
anyway.
I get that. I meant like just
The importance of that story to me, the point of that story was always just what a ridiculous human thing. It's I wasn't concerned about. I've never thought twice about what the songs may have sounded like if they'd written with them. It's not even about that. It was just a really big gaffe, is what it was, and it was and that's and then of course it's just one of those things where for me, I just went, this is what, there's only so, what am I doing here? Like why do I still keep thinking this is going to start making more sense?
right. Well, to me, I think it's crazy to me because as a musician and a guitar player, like, yeah, let's write some songs. It just sounds like awesome. Jimmy Page, it'd be so
Yeah, no,
fun.
it's a basic. The answer is
Right,
always yes. It's
right,
just
right, exactly.
you don't have to do anything. You just say yes and figure it out later.
I think what I meant. I'm sorry if I misconstrued it. I meant like I was surprised that you had probably a better relationship with Jimmy than those guys did, and he's not like, you know what, hey Steve, I'm out of here. My back's killing me. The shenanigans are too much. Like you're like, all of a sudden you're like, he's gone. Like he didn't say anything to you either. Like and I was surprised that he didn't like give you a heads
No,
up.
I don't. I've never even thought about it like that. I mean, it's a big deal to. It's a big thing to pull out of that tour and fly to England and have back surgery. There's other things on his mind. I don't think he was too concerned about the status of our relationship, exchanging recipes, and you know what I mean? It's not like I didn't think twice
Right,
about that. When I say we got along great and we're friends, that's like people on tour together do.
right.
We had a really easy rapport, and I know he liked playing with me, but that's as far as that went. There was nothing else that should have been read into that.
When that was over, and I hear you on that. I agree. You guys did do a couple albums, but then you guys came out and you did War Paint, and then afterwards you guys ended up doing Before the Frost, which I thought were
Mm-hmm.
really good albums, really
Yeah.
organic, and I feel like you guys were really was back in your spot again. Um, so when you guys dissolved again for the billionth time, we all know why. It was kind of a disappointment, but once you read the book, and I want people to read the book, you kind of get an idea of what you went through, what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and what would take somebody to leave. Be like, it's just the Black Crows. There's a lot more going on to that in the behind the scenes that you don't really see, despite all the great music
Sure.
you guys did. And the one thing that surprised me
Well,
is
a
when
real
the
easy way to. Sorry, I was going to say it's an easy explanation. Is look, you're on stage for 2 hours, but you're in a band for 24 hours. And it takes bands. It takes a lot of work to keep a um, a band who respects each other and values each other's efforts and time, and a band with boundaries and healthy personal relationships, that takes a lot of work. You know, so a band without those boundaries and a band that's at each other's throats, it's an insurmountable amount of work. Was ultimately how I see it.
I was surprised when I was not when they broke up, but when Rich ended up doing the Magpie Salute, it feels like half the
Mm-hmm.
band was there, except for obviously Chris was going to be there. But were you invited at one point to be part of that or anything?
Yeah. No, he called, and then we actually got together once too. He very much was wanting me to be a part of that. It was nothing I was interested in. I mean,
Okay.
we were talking then at the time and very friendly, and I was happy to talk with him about it. I mean, from the jump, I said, I'm not interested in this. I didn't understand. I wasn't at all interested in playing Black Crowes music unless it was the Black Crowes, and
Right.
that had come and gone. I mean, simply put, it's like I didn't like how Chris ended the Black Crowes, but it doesn't make sense to me to play Black Crowes music with someone else singing those songs.
Okay, so well, I was gonna say it's a good thing because unfortunately I actually had Mark on the show, and Mark, when him and the brothers got back together again, he got dropped like a hot potato, and he didn't even make a phone call himself. So you would have,
Yeah.
it would just been a fruitless situation. Um, but moving forward, today obviously they're doing their thing, you're doing your thing. You wrote the book. The book was quite successful, I think. Are you gonna write anything else, even if it's not about music? Like, like it doesn't have to be Black Rose related. Did you enjoy it?
Uh, did I enjoy what?
Writing the book. Like,
Oh yeah,
it
no,
might
it's
be a,
great.
a thing.
I really like writing. I've never written a book, but I've always written. I mean, I have a lot of short stories and just things, generally speaking, just for my own, just to get it all out. I've always written. So the idea of sitting down and writing a book was daunting until I started, and then once I started, I was just swimming with the current. I mean, it was the original book is almost 1,000 pages long, and I honest to God, I could have written for another year. I could have just kept going. I enjoy that exercise, if you will. So yeah, that was all great. And then I really enjoyed editing, because editing is where you're really writing. That's where you
Yeah.
really put the story together. I mean, I learned that it's real easy to tell the story. It's much more, there's the discernment involved in shaping that story and crafting it and keeping up with the thematic arc and all this stuff. That's really fascinating. I really enjoyed that too. So I liked every bit of it. But that said, I haven't thought at all about doing another one about anything. I don't have some great American novel in me or anything.
Well, just more because, like, I mean, you've done a lot. It's almost like you could be a life book with your antidotes and you could pull from different parts of your life through your experiences and stuff. I just think, obviously doing radio, you have a lot of things that you might not realize you kind of
Well,
put
I
out
think I
there.
get them all out on the radio. I mean, that's part
Fair
of
enough.
it. It's like I do it in those fits and starts, and I do it in little bits and bops. I've told stories about my family and about my the family I grew up in, my family now, my kids, my wife, my friend, whatever. I have a million stories that I tell all the time, so I don't feel the need to write them down, because if you listen to Steve Gorman Rocks tonight, there will be some story at some
Right.
point, and it could be like, oh my God, I danced in 8th grade. The first slow dance of my life was to this song. It could be that simple, or it could be something far more involved. But I'm telling stories all the time.
All right. Fair enough. I just enjoyed the book. I thought there was, a little more than just a story in it.
Yeah.
That, your writing skills were a
Well,
little,
thanks.
were good, just like a regular author. I figured, it'd be kind of cool if you continued on with that. Well, anyway, I want to thank you for
Yeah.
being on. I want people to check out Trigger Happy, check out your radio show. I'll put the links underneath the YouTube show and on the podcast, and people
Yeah.
check it
Right
out
on.
after this. All right, man. So thanks a lot. I
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
it.